I was born in Idabel, Oklahoma, a very long time ago. But I grew up in Pasadena, Texas. My daddy was a country Baptist, and my mom was a Methodist turned Baptist. And church was always just a part of my life. I was saved and baptized at age 9, and if, like a lot of the ladies have already said, if the church doors were open, I was there. I graduated high school in 1966 with aspirations of being an English lit teacher, but I was in love. And in 1967, I married my high school sweetheart, who was then a Marine, and we moved to California. God had a very unique plan for my life. He just hadn't clued me in yet. It's said that there are defining years that we all go through, years that change our lives. Getting married was a major change in my life. Vietnam was a life changer. And when Mike was born in 1970 and then Jeff in 1973, our lives changed dramatically, but we were good at the new life. We had good jobs, good kids, a good house, good friends, and a good church. We were happy. Life was good. Then on Friday, May 9th, 1986, the life that we enjoyed and took for granted ended. In the blink of an eye, it was just gone. Everything changed. All the plans, the hopes, the dreams, the future, just gone. Mike was 15 and in 10th grade and a starter on the varsity football team. He was gifted and talented, straight A's, high SAT scores. He wanted to go to Texas A&M, where we found out a week after his injury he'd gotten a 4-year academic scholarship. And then he wanted to go to Stanford and be a pediatrician. Mike suffered a severe brain injury that afternoon at football practice. He was hit, came off the field complaining of a headache, but was put back into play where he was hit again. He went into seizures and slipped into a coma that lasted 11 months and 10 days. Our world just stopped, and a new and very surreal world began. During the next couple of weeks, Mike coded several times a day, and we just held our breath. They gave Mike less than 0.5% chance of survival. One afternoon, I just needed to breathe some fresh air, so Dwayne and I went outside for a walk. And as we were going out, I stopped by the chapel, and I said a prayer, and I told God that I thought I could handle anything that lay ahead, but I just didn't think I could prepare myself, not even one more time, for my child to die. I asked God, I asked God to somehow please let me know what he was going to do, if I would get to keep him or not. It had been raining for days, but it was just a drizzle that afternoon. And as Dwayne and I rounded the building, there was a bright light in the sky and a break in the clouds. Peeking through was a brilliant, perfect double rainbow. As I stopped and looked at it, I could actually feel the fear leave my body. I knew Mike was not going to die, in spite of all the odds. God made me a promise that day, and he sealed it with a rainbow. But most of all, God gave me hope. We braced ourselves for what was to come, but I knew God would get us through it. After 4 months in ICU, Mike was care flighted to a rehab in Denver. As we left our acute hospital, Mike's neurosurgeon said to us that there is no medical reason why Mike should still be alive. Our family lived apart for the next 15 months. Dwayne was in Arlington. Jeff, who was then just 12, lived in Coweta with my parents, and I moved around with Mike to the rehabs. I was so scared, but at every rehab, at every hospital, God gave me a rainbow. When we arrived at the rehab in Denver, there was a big rainbow shining over the mountaintop. and I felt peace and strength. In September, as the care flight landed in San Antonio, a rainbow arched the sky, and I knew again that God was there. Months passed, and I was lonely and very tired and angry. Late one night, after a really difficult day, I went for a walk. I often walked in the locked unit because at night the halls were empty and I could cry and yell and nobody could hear me. I remember shaking my fist and yelling, "God, where are you?" I was really mad at God. And I asked him, "Why my child? Why not the druggy kid on the corner?" And then I heard this voice say, "Why not your child?" I stopped dead in my tracks. I thought I just heard God. And that was a thought that will humble you quickly. Well, it wasn't God. It was a visiting preacher. We walked and we talked, and he told me that God had not deserted me or Mike, but that God had a plan. He told me to hang on tight, let God have control, and good would come from this nightmare. He prayed for us, and he left. But I was changed. On April 19th, 1987, Easter Sunday, Jenny, another 16-year-old brain injury patient at the rehab, was leaving for her first car ride with her family. And she picked up her little hand and very shakily waved goodbye to Mike. Mike had not moved a muscle, made eye contact, nor responded in any way in over 11 months. We watched as he slowly picked up his right hand and waved goodbye to Jenny. No one breathed. And just like that, he was awake. But our long and difficult journey had really only just begun. We went home in May 1987. Mike was transferred to a rehab in Dallas, and I walked back into my house for the first time since the day Mike was hurt. I felt like a stranger. Reality was beginning to sink in. Jeff came home, and we had to begin to put our life back together. It was very hard because we really didn't know each other anymore. We were each different, and each grieving, and each angry. And our lives revolved around brain injury. We went back to church, but only once. Our pastor, a former football coach, cried and cried when he saw us, and our friends didn't speak to us because they just didn't know what to say. So we never went back. For almost 10 years, we didn't walk through a church door. But God never left us. For 7 years, I ran a weekly support group in Arlington for families living with brain injury. We shared and laughed and helped each other heal. One day, I got a call to speak at a brain injury conference in Washington, D.C. about brain injury in high school football. I really thought they had the wrong phone number. I was not a public speaker. But Mike, it seemed, was the first survivor of such an injury, and they thought his story needed to be told. So as scared as I was, I took a deep breath and said, okay. And thus began my new career. For 5 years, I traveled with a small group speaking at football coaches' conferences and brain injury conferences. The team was comprised of retired pro players, pro coaches, high school coaches, neurosurgeons, neurologists, and me, the mom. Each time I walked up to speak, those coaches were looking at me with their arms crossed, and I thought, God, what have you got me into? I would go home after each presentation and tell Mike that it was really him that was speaking. I was just his voice. Slowly the story spread. Concussion awareness was heard more often during games, and more attention was being paid to second impact syndrome guidelines, and guidelines were put in place. The foundation had been laid for change. Then in 1995, God literally picked us up and moved us to Coweta because it's where we could all breathe again and live again and laugh again. Nobody knew us like we were before. We got to start our life over. This time, God got me involved with a conference team that educated special education teachers about brain injury. I retired from speaking about brain injury in 2005 because I just couldn't keep ripping the scabs off. I had to let them heal for good. So God sent me in new directions. God took a very ordinary, very imperfect person and gave her a voice to invoke changes for His glory. God took our horrific situation and turned it into a speaker platform that would call attention to brain injury in football and living with brain injury. God knew my heart and how I would respond to His call, even though I didn't have a clue who that woman was. Mike is severely physically disabled, but God so graciously left him with his original orneriness and his unconditional love for others. God left Mike with his cognitive ability to understand and to communicate. But God so lovingly took from Mike the ability to grieve over his lost dreams. God gave us the ability to care for Mike and to keep him with us and to give him the best life he could possibly have. Jeff overcame crippling grief and anger from Mike's injury. He was saved and baptized and fell in love while he was in college. God took our nightmare and turned it into a new, normal life. Life still has its potholes and ditches and roadblocks, but that's just life. And I'm thankful for every minute of every single day. Life is abundant with God's grace. My grandsons are living proof of that. Hope is the confidence in God for the future. There are 25 verses in the Bible that talk about hope. Romans 5:2-5 say, "And we rejoice in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not disappoint us. He is truly the hope that is in me." Mike's birthday was July 9th, and we celebrated this year with a big fireworks party. He had 2 cakes. One said happy 46th birthday. The other one said happy 30th birthday. God kept the promise He made to me on that rainy day, May 1986, and He's still seeing us through.
Good morning. My name is Julie Valsaint, and I normally go to the first service, so a lot of you guys are probably like, who is she? So I was asked to give my testimony, and I was surprised to be in the second service, but I was told I could switch if I wanted to, but I felt like there was a reason that the Lord put me in this second service, so I thought, well, I'll just stick with it. And then I got the pleasure to speak this morning as well. So I just wanted to let you know that I was raised in church. My parents took me to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. My whole childhood, we went to church. I went to a Free Will Baptist church. I grew up in a Free Will Baptist church, and my mom was my Sunday school teacher, and we were very active in our church. Whenever I was a youth, we did all the typical youth activities. We had a husband and wife. They were our youth leaders, and they would take us bowling and roller skating and all those fun things we did. But whenever I became a senior, the youth leaders had left our church, and I realized that nobody was leading our youth. So I asked my preacher if I could do that. I felt like the Lord was asking me to be the youth leader at my church. So He allowed me to do it, and I just did it for a short time because I was 18 and getting ready to go off to college. But while I did, was leading them, we had a missionary couple that was in our church, Howard and Willie Gage, and they had been missionaries to Africa, and I asked them if we could come listen to them talk about Africa. And so we went to their house, and they got out all their things from their trips, and they were telling us, about building dormitories and building a hospital and meeting the people over there and how they were in the Ivory Coast and just that how much the people needed to hear about Jesus and how many people they had met. And the thing that struck me the most, that there were people in this world that have never heard the name of Jesus Christ. And I was really shocked because I was raised about an hour from here out in the country, and everybody I knew was a Christian and went to church, and we all knew Jesus. So it was at that moment that I knew that I needed to do something about that, but I wasn't really sure what my role would be in spreading the gospel. So I graduated high school, and I went off to NSU. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to major in, but my entire family pretty much is teachers. My dad was a teacher. My aunts, uncles were teachers. My cousins are teachers. So I just figured I would be a teacher too. I didn't really know what else to do. So I went to NSU and I majored in education, elementary education. My first semester, however, was not successful. I was very shy. I was very scared. I grew up in Adair, and I graduated with about 63 people in my class. And I went to NSU where I had hundreds of people sitting in classes with me. And I got very nervous, and I didn't want to be in front of all those people. So I didn't drop out of college, but I had a very low grade point average. So I had to leave NSU. I didn't have to, but I chose to leave NSU. And I moved back in with my parents, and I went to Rogers in Claremore. And I did 2 years at Rogers, and then back then it was just a junior college. So I didn't have any other, I didn't know what to do, so I went back to NSU. And I moved into an apartment with a friend. And we started attending the Baptist Collegiate Ministries, and that's where I really started feeling the call to missions. And the night before college was to start in January for the spring semester, at like 11:30 at night, my roommate and I decided we were going to drop out of college. So we called the NSU hotline, and we withdrew from all of our classes right then. So the next day, I had the pleasure of calling my parents and saying, hey, I'm going to the mission field, and I just dropped out of college. They were not very happy, but they let me move back home again. So I moved back home with my parents again, and I started working in Pryor. I got a job, and from January to August, I just kind of floated through life, not really sure how I was going to become a missionary, but I knew that I wanted to be a missionary. And I found out through the preacher at my church that the Free Will Baptists have a college in Moore, and I could go to college there and get my degree in missions. So I signed up, went off to Hillsdale. It's called Hillsdale Free Will Baptist College in Moore. I attended there for 3 years. And while I was there, my worldview drastically changed. I probably didn't have a worldview before I started traveling because like I said, I grew up in Oklahoma out in the country. So I didn't really have a worldview. We didn't travel a lot. So I was able to go on my first mission trip to Puerto Rico. I went for a week. We painted a church. We had outdoor church services. And then I was able to go on an internship to Brazil. I was there for 10 weeks. I worked in a children's home. And all of these things really shaped my worldview and changed the way that I saw other people, other cultures, other just ways of life that I didn't know existed. All I knew was my way of life. And then I came back home in my last year of college. There was a lady at our college that said, hey, there's a mission opportunity. We're going to go work at a homeless shelter in Waco, Texas. Who wants to go? So there were 5 girls. We all signed up. We were like, yeah, we'll go. We'll serve homeless people. We'll serve soup. It'll be fun. So we took off going to Waco, Texas. And when we got there, to our shock and surprise, we actually ended up having to be homeless for the weekend. It was actually like a mission trip. So I spent the weekend in Waco, Texas, actually living on the streets, digging through the dumpster for food, asking anybody for money. And it was, again, another just eye-opening experience of how people live, and it's much different, and it was much harder. The people that I expected to help me refused to help me. The people that I was scared to ask for money or for help were the ones that I had to get the courage to go in and ask. They were the ones who helped me. So it was just another eye-opening experience to just the ways of our life. College came to an end. I was there for 3 years, and I was graduating, and my mission director at the school called me in and said, "Hey, Julie, I have a job opportunity that I think you'll be really good for." And he asked me if I would be willing to go to the Virgin Islands and teach in St. Croix. And I kind of chuckled because it had been kind of like an ongoing joke with the mission students that we would go to the islands and hang out on the beach and we would minister to people. I didn't really know there was a place called St. Croix. I thought it was just a joke. So whenever I was like, well, yeah, sure, there's really an island called St. Croix, yeah, I'll go. I got the job. I went and I was a high school English teacher. I taught high school English and writing. All through college, this is something I just wanted to say, that all through college, I never really had a boyfriend, and I was getting older. I was like 22. I was worried that I would never find a husband. I would never get married. I didn't have, any prospects. I was going off to this island, and I started praying, God, there's never going to be a man on this island because it's an island of people, I don't know. I'm just never going to find a husband. So help me, Lord, just to focus on your work and to do your will. So I was there for about 2 months and working at the school, and this man walks up, and he's doing artwork on the building. And I just thought, okay, Lord, here's my chance to, start witnessing for you. So, hey, you like to paint? I think that was, my first line to him. Well, we ended up talking for about a month, and then we started dating, and then now we're married. So you probably don't ever really see us that often because, we don't come to second service. But in first service, we sit on the tiny bench in the back. We are the back row Baptists for sure. So the Lord led me to my husband on a tiny island that I never dreamed of. So the Lord just has plans for your life. He has amazing things that you never expect. So now we've been living in Coweta for 9 years. We've been married for almost 13. We have 2 little boys, and I moved back home from the Virgin Islands, and we got married, and I started teaching at a Christian school and found out that I could get my alternative certification to teach at a public school. So that's what I did. That's how I've got into public education, is going through alternative certification. And I feel like a lot of people tell me my mission field now is my students. Sometimes it's really hard to see that because I still want to be on the mission field away, not here. So I try to remember that my students are my mission field, and I do pray for them constantly. So that's my testimony.
Okay, hi, my name is Meek. You'd think, leading worship up here, I wouldn't be nervous to do this, but I'm shaking really bad. Also, I took a year of high school speech, and that did no good. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I was saved. I came my first year here to Falls Creek with First Baptist Church, and that's when I got saved. But I want to tell you a little more about how I truly came to know Christ and truly came to understand what it means to devote my life to him. So I started running cross country my sophomore year, and if you don't run, it's pretty bad. It's awful. But I became addicted to it somehow, and I ran a lot. I would run probably up to 8 miles a day, and I would work out also in the mornings. I was into weightlifting, and I got very obsessed with it, and I definitely devoted my life more so to that than I did to Christ. So being saved in 7th grade, I kind of fell away from that and started focusing more on just being fit and trying to win my cross-country races and just be the best I could at that rather than in my Christian life. My diet consisted mostly of oatmeal, sweet potatoes, and a lot of coffee. It was mostly because I'm a vegetarian, so if you can understand, I didn't get a lot of protein from sweet potatoes and oatmeal, and definitely not coffee. So I started losing a lot of weight. I got down to 106 pounds, and that really affects your body. It affects your mind, and I became very, very weak. And sorry. So that started to affect emotionally. I was not ready to be with Christ. I could not focus on anything. I couldn't be nice to my family because I would snap just because I was hungry, or it's just very hard to even focus on it was hard to focus on my daily life. I couldn't do anything. Like, I was basically a body walking. So I obviously let that entirely control my life for a while. And it got to the point where my body decided that if I wouldn't feed it, it would feed itself. So it's a weird thing. If you've never heard of sleep eating, it's really weird. I literally will wake up, or not even wake up. I will subconsciously eat, and I still do that. And that really affected my weight, obviously. So I went up 20 pounds my junior year. And if you understand, body image is a big deal for girls, especially in high school, and that was pretty much devastating to me. And it was very devastating to my cross-country career. I had plans of going to college and running on a scholarship, but that was not going to happen anymore. My times definitely went down. They suffered, or they went up, actually. But so after I realized, I finally came to means with the fact that I was not going to go to college on a running scholarship. It really forced me to find something else in my life, and I realized that the only thing I had left was God. And so gaining that much weight so fast really affected me. I was crying constantly. I would say I was pretty depressed at that point. And so I had to focus on God, or else I don't know what I would have done, honestly. So this was the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with, and that I'm still dealing with. But it really forced me to see that I've been relying on the wrong thing. I was relying too much on material things, and I was relying on myself rather than relying on God. I could see how much I had neglected him, and I began feeling convicted for how much time I gave to running and how little time I gave to God. So it took over a year for me to realize, really, but it made my faith stronger than ever. I understand why I had to gain this weight, but it's still very hard to deal with, but it really made me focus on God's plan more so than mine. And my favorite verse is Proverbs 16:9, which says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." And I just think that everyone needs to know that God's going to fulfill his plans for you, whether you want him to or not, and in any way he has to, really. I still run. I'm a senior now, so I'm still running, but this year I've been more so focused on leading my team in prayer and leading my team with verses. I'll bring the daily verse for our races, and it's so much more rewarding to see my team grow in Christ together than it was to win any race. It's a different feeling, and it's so much greater. So I've learned through all of this that I should not set my course, and that I should just listen to God and follow the steps in which he's leading me, because the outcome is so much better. Thank you.
Okay.